kia koutou I whai wāhi mai, ki tō tātou hui. No reire mihi ana rā kia tātou katoa, kua ua mihi anō rā ki te atuatanga, mona tini mana ki tanga kouhia mai nei ki runga kia tātou, o tira ki runga ki tō tātou kingi e noho mai nā, I roti te tau maru o na mātua tūpuna e takoto mai rā I runga o tau piri mau. Me te āhuatanga anō ki rā ki tōna koronei hana ngā huru māwha kua pahurene. Me tōna rereke kātahi rā te koronei hana rereke ra wātu I whakairia ki runga I purangi hei tirohanga matatū matatini. Ahua no, ka tika me mihi ki a rātau ki o tātou na mate, ko naro nei te sirohanga kanohi. Te toko maha o rātau kua rūpeke ki tō tara. Mai I te tai tokera huri atu ki te rāwhiti, I te hau āuru ki te tonga, whakawhiti atu rā, te moana whakakope tole o rau kawa ki te wai pōnamu ki ngā motu ririki huri atu huri mai. Hui a katoa o tātou tini mate kia te ngihia kia mihi ai te rāni e ngā mate. Oki, tira. Tātou katoa, tihei mauriora. Tihei mauriora nā maunga whakahi, ngā waitapu, ngā marae, koutou nā whakamahana o ngā pāpāe o roto I tō tātou rohe, tēnā koutou. Koe no ko tāku, e wāhi tātou hui ki e tahi, I tētahi karakia potone. No reira ke inoi tātou. E papaerangi, tēnei au, te hōkai nei au, kutapuā, rangi tapuā, haruru ki runga o mātangi reia. He tapuā whakohoi te pō rongorongo te pairu, he tapuā whakohoi te ao whakarongo ariki. O ie. Papaerangi, tēnei au, te amoake nei tāku toki nui, toki roa, toki hahau. Ka hahau atu taku toki nei ki kāuru o te rangi ki take o rangi. Kia re iho mai ko te wai orongo mai he wai tohi mauri. Tēnā tohi a mai tātou ki te tohi wiwi, ki te tohi wāwā, ki te tohi whakamana I te kupu, whakamana I te whakaaro tōtika. Kia eke, kia koke whakamua, tēnei o tātou kaupapa. Tēnā, takahia rānea hou. Turuturu ōwhiti whakamaua kia tīnā.
Tīnā.
Aumi e hui e tāi.
Kia
ora tātou.
Kia ora, Shane. Thank you for that. And a very warm welcome to everyone. Morena, Susan. Look, I have apologies this morning from, as I said, Graham Webber, Liz Stolwick and Huapai. And also, as I understand, Andrew, you have to leave at midday. And I think there was somebody that was coming in at midday as well. I think it might have been Huapai, is it?
That's correct, Jim. It was Huapai.
Yeah, okay. So I don't know whether we'll still be going by then. So, but anyway, if she makes it, that's great. So were there any other apologies anyone had?
Jim, I think Barney's going to enter the meeting late.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we can take an apology for lateness from Barney as well then.
I've just been texting him, so he's clearly intending to come.
Okay. All right. Hey, thanks for that. So yeah, as I say, a mover and seconder for those apologies. Andrew and Gayleen.
Yeah.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Yeah, contrary, carried. Thank you for that. Are there any disclosures of members' interests? Kia ora, Barney. No members' interests. Any late items that anyone wishes to bring up?
Yeah.
Kataraina.
I have a couple. One is about the committee for the Māori, whatever it's called. And the other one is about the netball courts.
So
there's a
which committee, Katarina?
I don't know, there's a you know that iwi committee that you're putting together, the Māori committee for the council, and I believe the applications are open. Myself and Liz and a couple other people are on that committee. So I want to have a quick chat about that. Okay. You know the committee I'm talking about?
Yeah, look, it's membership on our standing committees. I think that's you're referring to. Gary, you were trying to say something? Yeah, Your Worship. I think Katarina's talking about the selection committee for those candidates. Okay. So that was some nominees from Ngāwi Tōpū, or about who that panel should be. Okay. All right. So that's right, Katarina? Yep. Yeah. And I can give an update on the netball courts. Sorry, Katarina, I haven't got back to you since last week. Okay. So yeah, we can have those two items as late items then.
I've got one.
Oh, sorry, Gayleen. Yeah.
I've got one. Gary might be able to update it too. It's about the Otohanga pā site out at Paruera.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay. And you've got that covered, Gary, have you? Yes. Okay. All right. So we have those three late items. Can I just have a mover and seconder to receive those, and we can discuss them at the end of the meeting, Katarina and Wire? Yeah. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Contrary? Carried. And the confirmation of the order of the meeting, everybody happy to work through it as listed?
Yep.
Okay, mover and seconder for that then, please.
Aye.
Gayleen and seconder. Andrew, all those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Contrary? Carried. Confirmation of the minutes. The minutes dated the 3rd of June.
I wasn't there.
I move.
Who moved? Sorry, that was Gayleen. And a seconder. Somebody that was there.
I was there. Only be why. Yeah.
Susan, did you second?
Yes.
Yeah. So Gayleen moved, Susan seconded. And were there any matters arising from those minutes? Quickly going through, I think there's about 8 pages of them. If I quickly run through page 2, we're probably covering off most of them, but page 2, 3, 4. Your Worship, just on the naming policy, just with Graham being away on sick leave at the moment, we haven't been able to progress that to the extent that we would have hoped by now. So it's still to be completed. So bring that back in December? Yep. Yeah. Page 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay, so
I've got a 14.
Oops, are we on different pages? That was just the pages of the minute scaling. It might be page 17 of the agenda.
Oh no, it's just the way that it's
yeah.
Okay. So, but I note that the papakainga is in the minutes, is in today's meeting.
Yeah.
Or is it, or is it not? It's part of the district plan, but it's to do next.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we can talk about that.
I think talk about to Tony when he's up for that one.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. So mover and seconder, that's a true and correct record.
Yep.
Yeah, Marcus and
Jim, I can't.
Susan. All those in favour? All those in favour?
Right.
Contrary? Carried. Then item 6, resignation of Louise. And look, there is a note in the agenda, but look, I'd like to obviously put that off until we're meeting face to face. And really sad, and I'd say it's more of a retirement than a resignation from Louise's point of view. And I was just trying to think when we first worked together on committees with the council, and I was talking to Gary this morning, I think it's probably 40 years ago, which is a bit of a worry, really. So,
Yes,
look, really would like to express our gratitude to Louise in person. So we can just leave that one sitting on the agenda for our December meeting, and hopefully we're at all together somewhere anyway at that point.
Right.
Your worship, just to add to that, I think there might be a couple of other resignations. I think Chris, Ricky and Rangiuia
That's right, I saw that.
as well. So we probably want to recognise them if we can get together in December. That would be great to recognise all of those.
Yeah, here, I'm here.
Yeah, Rangi, I see you there.
You're still there.
Yeah.
Is it just Chris or?
Yes, just Chris.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Apologies for that.
That's all right. Okay.
That's right.
All right. So yeah, look, definitely recognise everybody that's obviously been involved. So yeah, let's do that when we're all together. It would be a lot better. Okay. So moving on to item 7, which is the district plan changes work stream. And Tony, are you going to take that?
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Tēnā koutou inara.
Hello, Tony, you traitor.
Kia ora. Nice to see you again. And the background is virtual, by the way. It's not I'm not really sitting here. So I just want to take you through an update of the district plan work program. It is fairly full and fairly busy, and since we last met, there's a couple of updates just to bring to your attention. So I'm looking at page 17 of the agenda. So since we last met, I think the government released the National Policy Statement for Urban Development, and that has 3 mandatory plan changes that we have to do under that. So one is to remove all the minimum car parking requirements in the district plan. Another one is to set housing bottom lines. So we see that as kind of minimum supply levels for housing in the district. And the third one is to do a plan change around intensification. So there's really a strong encouragement or national direction to encourage intensification around urban areas. And we have a program of work around that. The first that you'll see will be a plan change, which we're directed not to do any consultation on, to remove the minimum car parking. And we're looking at doing that in October. The next one on page 18.
Bring it a little bit more, please, Tony, excluding the car parks.
Sorry, what were you after some more of?
Around the car parking.
Oh, yeah. So the National Policy Statement directs all councils to take out minimum car parking requirements. So in our district plan and most district plans at the moment, there are generally rules that say if you want to develop something on a site, you have to have a minimum number of car parks. And the national direction now is that we must take those rules out of plans. Part of the rationale behind that is it's kind of a bit of a mixed bag. Part of it is around freeing up some really highly valuable urban land for development rather than use of car parks. Part of it is around encouraging and incentivising people to get into different modes of transport, so public transport, cycling, alternatives to cars. And there will be some, there'll be some impacts. It's not going to happen. So when we put the notice in the plan and take the rules out, you won't see any immediate change. It's probably something that will come out as new developments roll through. And there may be some increased pressure for parking on roads. If we get new developers or new developments who don't want to put on-site car parking, we can't require them to anymore.
Wow. Okay.
So Tony, just from a point of clarification, that's not just residential, that's even in the commercial area.
Yeah, correct. So yeah, that's a good point. And anywhere in the district, so regardless of which zone it's in. So effectively, the cost of providing car parks has now shifted from the private developer to the public. So ratepayers have got to pay for it. That may be an outcome, correct, yeah.
And in Waikato District Council, the streets in the town is controlled and owned by the council. So the fallback will be on the council to ensure that there's car parking on the street. You're right, Tony. So yeah, that's bloody dumb. Okay.
I agree with you 100%.
Jesus.
But you remember, Jim, a lot of that car parking stuff came about from the public outcry from trucks parked in public car parks on the side of the road. And nobody liked that.
Yeah.
So if you're going to change it now, watch out for the community. They're going to come back with a force.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, Galen, they won't be able to come back to the council because it's legislative now, and I suppose we've just got to try and manage what we have to do in the public spaces.
So will that mean that Waipa will then put patrol wardens for traffic parking?
No.
Yeah,
yeah, for when you park over the limit.
Yeah, so yesterday, that was the indication that we wanted to, I suppose we still want to keep a fairly relaxed enforcement regime, but we are going to have to increase it because it's the only way to, I suppose, ration the available car parking spaces on the main street, on the roadside. So yeah, enforcement will obviously have to follow. And it's not just Waipa, Galen, this is a national standard, so it's every council, not just Waipa.
Just a question, Tony, Barney Manai here. Cycling tracks, does that mean that some sort of levy is going to be put on developers in terms of future development of cycling tracks so that they're not placed? I guess Waipa is not as bad because the streets are much wider, but in other areas, the streets are nowhere as wide, and you actually need to so that they're not riding on pathways to actually develop some sort of a strategy. Is something going to be along those lines?
Yeah, kia ora, Barney. That's a really good question, actually. So as part of this, and I didn't mention it yesterday, SPMP either, Jim, under the Resource Management Act, we were able to take financial contributions. So we have development contributions, which is what developers pay for future infrastructure. And then we have financial contributions, which is what land use and developers pay for immediate impacts, if that makes sense. The RMA was changed about 7 or 8 years ago to take those out under the national government, and the Labour government then repealed that change. So financial contributions are back in as of this year. In our district plan, we have Chapter 18, which means that we can impose financial contributions on resource consents that come through. And so what that allows us to do is put the onus back on developers and applicants to help fund some of the council's infrastructure if we can demonstrate their adverse effects. So this could be one real example where, and we can do that for off-site effects as well. It doesn't have to be related to the site. So our financial contributions could potentially allow us to require financial contributions for cycleways if there's an impact on the road. So that's a really good question.
Yeah, thanks. That just reinforces me just buying an electric bike the other day, and so other people who may be in that forum of helping the footprints, you know. And so, yep, I take that. That's great.
So I have another question around about the same stuff, and it's about the. Does that include sports areas as well? New shopping centres and stuff like that? Because you know how the majority of people go to shopping centres because the parking is free, and our courts, not our courts, but our rugby, our whatever, you know, if people can't find a park, they park anywhere. So does all this include that as well?
Yes, it does. The only thing that we now are able to mandate is accessible or disabled parking. And so we do know, for example, if there's a new medical centre or a new shopping centre that went in, and there is there's some talk about that in Cambridge North area, a new supermarket. My pick would be that a developer would want to put on-site car parking to attract customers there. So even though we're not requiring them to do that, I think that we'll still see on-site car parking happening for those major developers.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'd support that, Tony. You know, the likes of supermarkets realistically can't run a business without car parks. I suppose the only question will be as to how many they provide, and that'll be over to them. And if they don't provide enough, well, it'll impact on their business, I would suggest. So that is the only control mechanism.
Or, Jim, they bring in phone, where they phone order, like they've done up here. Yeah. And they Uber order. That's that sort of thing.
Could well be. Okay, Tony.
Okay, so on to page 18, top of page 18. So Katarani will be well aware of this. So the government's also issued new national directions on September for national environmental standards and policy statements around freshwater management. That primarily impacts the regional council. So Waikato Regional Council is the, I guess, recipient of that to implement it. We've had a look at it and we don't think there's any direct impacts on Waipara District Council. There may be indirect ones whereby, for example, Waikato District Regional Council, if we are seeking discharge consents, tighten up some of the conditions around that. So that's something that we're still coming to grips with in terms of what it means, and we're talking with WRC colleagues around what they think it means. There's two that the government has pushed back. So there's a national policy statement for Indigenous biodiversity, and there's a national policy statement for highly productive soils. Both of those have been deferred to around mid-2021, the Ministry have advised us. And the big one that you're probably all aware of is the Rma Reforms. So the Randerson report came out with some recommendations for quite extensive reform of the Resource Management Act. The summary is all there on page 18, but it creates, if the recommendations go through, it would create 3 new acts. The RMA would be replaced by a Natural and Built Environments Act. The good news is, I guess, there'd be new environmental bottom lines. So across the country, we've seen various degrees of environmental management. And so what would be established in the new Act, if the recommendations went through, would be hard bottom lines. And the director of MFE talked about hard and tight bottom lines. So I think there's a real desire to actually put some bottom lines in. In terms of urban development, the intention there would be to do more planning up front and have less regulation through resource consent process. So we'd probably see better management of the natural resources and simplified and streamlining of urban planning. There's a new Strategic Planning Act which would create mandatory spatial plans for the region, and we're actually well advanced in that here in the Waikato region with Futureproof. And there'd be a third new act called the Managed Retreat and Climate Change Adaptation Act, and that would give councils some tools and set up a regime for better management of climate change mitigation as well as adaptation. And of interest to this group, there's also in the replacement to the RMA, or actually separate, a recognition that there needs to be a better mechanism of iwi Māori involvement in decision making around planning. And so the recommendation is to set up a new national iwi advisory group to advise local government around iwi Māori perspectives, I guess, and increased participation. And the words that they use in the recommendation is mana whenua. So they've gone away from iwi authorities and they're starting to talk about mana whenua. So increased participation for mana whenua and RMA plans and spatial plans. So again, we're probably relatively well positioned in the Waikato and Waipara. Just look at this committee, for example. Not all councils have committees like this. And so we've probably got a bit of a lead on other councils around this, but we'll have some more tools that we'll be able to roll out if this all goes through. Talking to various colleagues and people and ministry officials, the feeling is that whichever party gets in after the elections will pick up the report and run with it. What we don't know is what recommendations they'll roll out and how fast they'll do it. But everyone I've spoken to, and the general consensus is there's no desire to roll back and not do a reform. So, and it may happen quite quick, depending on the government appetite. They have talked about having the new acts in place in July 2022 is the recommendation, which is quite fast. But there will be a consultative process through that. So I guess some anxiety around what it might look like, but probably some opportunities in there. And my thinking is quite an exciting time to be in this area, because there might be some really good outcomes that come out of this.
I have a question, Tony, and it's to do with your district plan that I haven't seen anything in it, and it's around water storage, because Waipa has very strict water regulations during summertime due to this, that, and whatever. Is there anything in the plan going forward about water storage, tanks and tanks for home? If there's deciding about how the council may want to help those people who want to put in a tank, doing away with resource consent, sort of like Auckland has done because of what happened with water care in the Waikato River. So going into the future, I don't know how far in the future, has the district plan, or is the district plan looking at water storage privately for new builds and all of that, because of the restrictions we have on water?
That's another good question. So at the moment, the district plan doesn't require that, but it also doesn't restrict it. So it's really optional and voluntary if anyone wanted to do that. There is a crossover with the Building Act as well. And so the Building Act doesn't require it either. The only thing that we do actually have in the plan at the moment is around rural water firefighting supply. Mm-hmm. And we are looking at reviewing that rule because there's some problems with it. But we haven't extended the scope of that to include water storage in general. It hasn't really come up as a, I know we were at level 3 or level 4, I think it was last summer, which was the first time we went there. If that's going to be an increased trend with climate change and the way things are going, then it may be something that we need to look at in the future.
So, Tony, if I can just add to that, I've been on a couple of Zoom calls with Waikato Tainui this week, and they're talking about their taniwha projects. And one of those is around water infrastructure, and sub-goal of that is around water storage, and they're looking at some pretty substantial storage opportunities up in the Huntly, the old Huntly mines area. So it is something that's gaining some currency, and probably is worth tracking what's happening up there.
Yeah, can I also add too, Tony? I'm just looking at something in the Otorohanga area where they're looking at storage waste, wetland storage thing, sort of a natural cave, where in the winter you're restricted in how much you're allowed to discharge water, and in the summer you don't have enough. So that's in terms of the environment around them. And so there are initiatives underway, and it's a matter of whether Waipa want to pick those up or other areas are going to pick it up in that space.
Through the chair, Jim, if just to relate some of the ongoing conversations since our last drought, prior to and since, in conversations with iwi members informally, but water is at the centre of many of our concerns, many of the iwi concerns, and at a home level, it is talked about quite a lot around getting tanks, how do we do that, etc., in order to save water, even if it's just for gardens, which again is another subject that's been brought to the fore through the COVID pandemic around food sovereignty. So it is very much a topic of discussion now, and it's alive. And as we go into summer, it will no doubt come up again. And that's again taking on Kataraina's point around whether or not we have any provisions for within the plan for home storage. But just to raise that, it is a discussion point.
I guess my corridor really, Tony and Jim, is about today, for instance, if someone who owns a house wants to put in a tank, what are the restrictions and what can the council do to help these homeowners today who already have homes to be able to put in a tank that will suit their land and property and all of that? So, you know, is there a resource consent? Is there any initiative from the council to help towards maybe someone wanting to do that? I guess looking in the future, I'm happy for whatever is coming up, but keep that topic on the table. But I'd like to bring the topic to the table about existing homes and whānau right now, because we did a whole healthy homes situation a few years ago. We looked at warm homes, this, that, and all of that. We didn't look into the future about where the water sits. Now, we are paying meter rates now, and it's not high, but the fact is to help some of our vulnerable people to be able to afford what they are going to do or what they have got. How can the council help them put in a tank, you know, for things like the gardens or the lawns or washing their cars and all of that, that the good water supply that we're being paid for through the meter is not used willy-nilly on silly things like that. So I guess my first take is, how can we help our owners today if someone wanted to put a tank in? What's the restriction?
Look, Caroline, it is a big topic and certainly worthy of discussion. But and a couple of the points that you've touched on there, I suppose, are the environmental concerns, and then there's the cost side of things and affordability. And I suppose, and certainly the council hasn't discussed it, but there's no formal policy on it, but there is nothing to stop somebody wishing to put in a rainwater tank in the urban centre if they wish. So if you put the environmental issues to one side, the absolute cheapest water you're ever going to get is through the public supply. So if you're going to put in a new tank and a pump, and then I suppose if you're going to try and use it for all of your activities in the house, then you've got to put some treatment capacity in there as well, because the new drinking water standards are going to say everybody's got to have a potable water supply. So if you're not going to put in treatment, then all you can use it for is your gardens or flushing toilets, etc., which means a duplicate plumbing system. So there are quite significant additional costs if you want to run a duplicate system on a normal residential property. And by far the cheapest option is to use the public supply. And if everybody invested anything that they were intending to spend on their own home into the public supply, there would be absolutely no need for rainwater tanks. From an environmental perspective, there's obviously some opportunities there for, I suppose, saving water, but and from an individual perspective, there's some savings, particularly over the winter period when it's raining quite consistently and your tank is always full. In the summer, when there's a public supply, we have to design, from a council point of view, that system to cope with everybody who wants to draw down water. And after a period of 2 or 3 weeks of no rain, everybody wants water from the mains. So all of our design work has to make sure that the pipes are big enough to supply the water that everybody wants in a summer period. So effectively what happens is people use the water for, if you want to call it free, in the wet weather. Come the summer, when there's a demand for it, all of their tanks are dry and they want to take it out of the public system. So there's increased costs then because we've got to supply surplus capacity over the winter. So it's quite a complex issue, and realistically, if the rain falls on the roof and gets discharged into the Waikato catchment, without going through a rainwater tank. It's the same volume of water that ends up in the catchment, whether it goes into a tank first and then onto the gardens, then into the catchment, as if it just flows straight into the Waikato catchment. So it's not a simple, let's put in tanks, everybody will save a bit of water and it'll have an impact on the environment either. So yeah, I think it's a topic that needs a lot of debate before we go trying to get people to put in rainwater tanks on every house. A lot of them can't be retrofitted. There's not enough space on a section. The sections are getting smaller. You know, it is a difficult situation.
But it's a conversation that needs to start somewhere, Jim.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, whether anybody wants to put one in or not, I think is immaterial.
Yeah.
If they decide it's a good idea for them, what I want to make sure is that the council may be behind it and try and help them to get there. But it's a conversation that your table needs to look at going into the future. For the simple reason is that they don't need to use good water for watering their goddamn garden, for washing their concrete or their house or something like that, you know. Yeah, how they use it. If you get the corridor right, the comms right, then people will understand what it's all about. And that's all I'm asking for, is put it on the table, have some good conversations around it, and make the community aware of maybe pros from your perspective, the councils, and cons. And so that they've got a whole wide repertoire to look at to see what's good for them and what's not. Like the car parking that's going to happen. That's all I'm saying. Kapai, thank you.
Yeah, kia ora. Okay, Tony.
Okay, thank you. So on to page 19, and turning to the plan changes.
On page 18 first, Tony, before you move.
Oh, sure.
Zoom is
sorry,
going
Galen.
crazy today. So is there a definition of mana whenua?
Sorry, I missed that.
On D, it's got mana whenua. You got a definition on that?
So the link at the bottom is to the full review of the RMA. It's about 560 pages, but if you downloaded that and you can do a search on there for mana whenua, that'll bring it up. So those are the words of the recommendation from the panel. And what they recommended, currently in the RMA, it talks about iwi authorities. It talks variously about iwi authorities and tangata whenua.
Yes.
What they're recommending is that the language moves away from those two things to mana whenua.
Yes.
I can't recall if they've actually defined it. I don't think they did.
Freaking hell's advising them.
Yeah, so there's probably a piece of work if that comes through around defining actually what that means, and you know, you folks around the table have a good idea of what that is, and probably if an iwi advisory authority is set up as recommended, I imagine that they might help define what that means. But that's a really good example of the details of the reform that even MFE officials can't answer yet.
But that would be inclusive of the area authorities?
Well, it's through the Waikato Regional Council work, we always interpreted mana whenua as, you know, those who had the mana over the whenua, and we relied on iwi to help us understand that. So it would include, I imagine, iwi authorities, hapu. It could even include down to marae level. So I think that's still a big discussion that has to happen before that's defined.
It is a discussion that needs to happen real quickly.
It's definitely a discussion point that needs to be clarified going forward, because the vernacular has changed and we've not been the ones to change it. When I say we, I mean Māori. The recreation of our words and terms to articulate points of law or new movements within policy and legislation. But mana whenua used to mean mana whenua rights.
Yep.
Now it's become a noun for a group of people who seem to be holding some notion of mana whenua rights. We've moved from tangata whenua on to mana whenua. But the descriptor or the the meaning of what it is that we're trying to discuss now is even lost amongst some of ourselves, because the field of understanding has moved. I don't have an answer to that as the iwi relations advisor, because it means different things in different contexts. So I think I'm very right to bring up that conversation and see how that's defined.
So we'll keep this committee informed on any action around the reforms in general, but in this in particular. And our expectation is that whichever government gets in and picks this up, they've indicated that they'll go through a consultative process on that, and there'll be the opportunity to input and feedback.
Because there could be a huge impact within Waikato itself, how the definition of that mana whenua is determined. Because within Ngāi Retopu itself, it has a
Vision.
yeah. There are different people who have rights at different places. So depending on what that looks like, otherwise you could end up with everybody having mana whenua over rights throughout the waipa, and that will be really messy. I'll leave it to you.
I was going to say thanks for the warning, Galen.
Yeah, anytime.
We'll need to watch that space.
Yeah,
Tony, do you want to carry on?
Thank you. So in the meantime, we do have iwi authorities, and we've been working with Shane. Mihi nui, Shane, for your support and assistance. On page 19, we've got, I guess, a starting list of both the iwi authorities as defined in the RMA, but we wanted to use best practice, so we're going wider than what just the RMA requires of us. And so that's the list that we are thinking we will be in main contact with in terms of the plan change work that's coming through. Ngā iwi tōpū aren't on there, but we will engage with Ngā iwi tōpū as well as if they are one of those groups. So that's just in there to give you an indication of what thinking is around that.
Good.
So just a couple of updates. This is my last update, Jim, around the plan change schedule itself. So on page 20 I'm on. So down the engagement column, so we've got all the plan changes on the left. Down the engagement column, some of those timeframes are subject to change a little bit just because of the workload and how things are panning out. 13, 15 and 16 are probably looking okay for the engagement we've got there. 17, we're still waiting for our engineers to come back with some further information on that. 18, beekeeping, that may be pushed out to October, just in terms of how that's tracking. And plan change 19, so that is rezoning of, it's the Hautapu industrial growth cell, and part of it still remains in rural zoning. So we've got some consultants working on that, and because of budget constraints and adjustments, we're getting that to a certain point and then holding on that, and that will be deferred into the 2021 financial year. Papakainga, so we've got a heap of work that we're getting through, and we're making some good progress on it. That's one of the next ones on our list to start scoping up and talking to whoever we need to talk to start working that up into what do we do with this, what does it look like. And the last one down on the list there, the ND, which stands for National Direction 1, that's around the minimum car parking. So that's where we don't have to consult. The government said, actually, we can't consult. We just put a notice in the paper and the plan has changed.
And Tony, that goes for housing density as well?
So housing bottom lines. So if you go to the bottom of that list, housing bottom lines, we don't have to consult on. But infill intensification, that must go through a consultative process.
Yep.
So it's probably worth just touching base on this on 3.4. So top of page 20, bottom of page 21. So we're looking at a two-stage engagement round with the iwi of the waipa. So the first one is going out with the individual plan change and saying, here's what we're thinking, here's some options, what do you think? An introductory letter's already gone out to our key contacts to say that we're doing this piece of work, to make sure everyone's aware that we've got a plan change program. that'll be followed up by each of the individual plan changes, and we might try and bundle those up to make it easier. Once we get that feedback in, then we start drafting up the plan change, and under the RMA we have to do a policy analysis, which is under Section 32 of the Resource Management Act. Once we've got that, a draft plan change and Section 32, at that point we'll take it to our Strategic Planning and Policy Committee, give them a heads up. Then we'll take it back out to the iwi authorities again and say, here's actually a draft that we'd like to notify. Do you have any feedback, any comments, anything you'd like to add into it? That feedback comes back in, then we finalise it, and then the last action there is public notification. So we want to make sure we do it right, and we want to make sure that we provide the opportunity for input and we listen to any feedback that's been given to us.
Okay.
Can
Thanks,
I ask
Tony.
about the iwi sites of significance? The do next.
Oh, yes. Yep, so that Maniapoto approached us, and they were doing some really cool GIS work around, I guess, validating the Wahitapu and other sites as well. Some quite exciting work. So what we've got, and quite typical of a lot of districts, is we've got Wahitapu and other iwi sites of significance which are in the district plan. Some of them might not have been ground truthed, and so Maniapoto was starting a piece of work around ground truthing some of those. We thought there would be merit in the do next, because it takes a bit of resourcing to do this, to look at all of our sites of significance in the Waipawa district plan and check that we've got them right. And we'll be, again, relying or asking for some iwi advice around that, because we don't have that knowledge. And it'll be probably quite an involved process of going out, getting some knowledge where that knowledge is able to be shared, pulling that back in, updating any maps, and then putting them out for a final check.
Jim, will that include the current sites that, I don't know whether council still has it or not, that was put together by Ngāi Taupō?
Yeah, so the question, Tony, was will it include the existing sites that are already in the district plan? Is that right, Gayleen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct. So that would be the starting point. We'd take what's in the district plan at the moment, and the question really is, have we got those sites right? Are they in the right location? That's question number one. And question number two would be, are there any other sites that need to go on there? So quite a big piece of work, a little bit of design, and we need to work with the iwi partners around how we do that. And just because of the other workload we've got at the moment, we haven't turned our minds to that, but it is a piece of work that we'd like to do.
But if your district plan was correct and the sites from that book was on your mapping, then how come I have to raise o tautahanga now? Because it would have been a site that was recognised in that book that Ngāi Taupō put together.
Gayleen, it is recognised on the plan. I've checked that one.
Right. So why didn't anybody raise it?
It hasn't come forward as an application.
What's the site, Gayleen?
O tautahanga.
Oh, right.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Tony. Kia ora, Harold.
You're muted, Harold. Unmute.
I'm pressing the wrong button here. Hey, just some insight, some background around that stuff that Tony's talking about. It's part of a project that Ngāti Maniapoto did. Those sites are actually specific to Maniapoto and to Matakore. But there were sites in this area that we did that exercise, that GIS exercise on, probably 4 or 5 years ago. So that gives you a context of where those sites are. And yes, Gayleen, they are also duly covered in the Ngāi Taupō one, because they're part of the same site that we've talked about with respect to that one as well. Thank you.
Yeah, kia ora, Harold. Okay, were there any other questions to Tony?
Just, Your Worship, just on that last point, also just want to recognise Rockawa have done some work in that significant site space as well that we need to touch base on there as well.
Thanks, Gary. Okay, no further questions. Thanks, Tony, for that full update. There's a recommendation just to receive the information. Can I have a mover and seconder for that? Gayleen and Barney. All those in favour?
Aye.
Contrary? Carried.
Thank you.
Okay, item 8, dog controls on Mount Kakipuku. And we have Carl here somewhere, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, Carl.
Thank you, Your Worship. Kia ora koutou, everybody. Good morning. So I'm the manager who has the joy of being responsible for dog control. So that's why I'm appearing before you today to present this report. So in opening, I'd just like to confirm that the Strategic Planning and Policy Committee were made aware of this issue yesterday as well. So they are ready for any recommendations that may come from your committee going forward. So I'll take my report largely as read. Hopefully it's provided a summary of the issues that have been raised with Council. And that's generally the question around whether the existing controls on Kakipuku and Moanga are appropriate. But probably more importantly, whether the processes that led to those controls were correct or were followed, and what we need to look at going forward to resolve this issue. So staff have taken quite an amount of time to explore the issues and the possible remedies that may exist in this space. And where we've ended up is that the only real option is to look at Council's dog control policy, because that's where these controls come from. That's the source of where the dog prohibited, dog on lead areas come from. And at present, that policy isn't scheduled until 2025. So the committee, the Policy and Planning Committee, will be looking for some direction on that time frame and what may be needed through that process. So if we go down that road, then the other part of it is that we want to make sure that we've captured any other sites that may be of concern or of interest as well. Okay. So we need to just be mindful that once the policy review starts, it's the full public consultation process, so it will open the door to everybody's ideas. We want to do some work up front to make sure that any other areas are captured in this early stage. So I'm interested in some of Tony's comments there about how there's already a process of identifying some sites that may have interest or concern, so we can have a look at that as well. And the other aspect we have to consider is that we need to balance it with our statutory obligations under the Dog Control Act as well, as to why that policy is in place and what it requires Council to do and not to do. So that's really the quick summary. It's, you know, we want to resolve this matter going forward, but we just cannot identify any quick fix that's going to satisfy the concerns that have been raised. So obviously the process needs to start somewhere. So that's why we've brought this matter to this committee today, and yeah, be keen on your thoughts and feedback.
So my question, Carl, is before the marae said anything, what was the rule from your perspective in relationship with the marae about dogs on Kakipuku?
So the Dog Control Act gives us three options. Either an area can be prohibited to dogs altogether.
Yes.
Dogs can be in an area, but they have to be on a lead, or they can be an area that can be free roaming with dogs off leads. So basically what the law...
Sorry.
So basically what the law says is that if a council doesn't make an area prohibited to dogs and it doesn't make it free off lead area for dogs, then by default it becomes an area that's dog on lead. So this particular piece of land has been dog on lead because neither of those other two options have been applied.
So Katarina, it's complicated there because the reserve at the top, which is a Crown owned, I think it's an historic reserve, has always been dogs prohibited because it's a Department of Conservation reserve. The piece that we're talking about is a piece of land that the council bought off of a adjoining landowner and has retired that and made it part of the reserve. So there's two different states up there, if you like, at the present time. That's correct, Carl?
That is correct, and that's obviously part of the confusion, that there is literally a line between these two pieces of
I guess the question is, because of the how important that manga is to the marae people, I'm presuming they don't want dogs up there at all. Is that right?
That would appear to be the view that's being presented.
So what's stopping you from not you personally, but what's stopping that happening? Because if the council has already extended the reserve area, which makes it under that banner, there's no dogs from there to there anyway. So what's stopping the council by making them whole of the manga dog free?
So the policy separates out land that's under Department of Conservation control from land that's a public place under Waipa control. So the dock area automatically gets dog prohibited unless dock has authorised otherwise themselves. But because this balance piece that's been added later is under Waipa's control, it doesn't get that automatic protection. It needed to have been done when the other controls were put in place.
So Carolina, to answer your question realistically, there's a process under the Dog Control Act that we have to go through and get the public feedback. So I suppose the problem that's arisen here, and it's probably going to come up on a number of other sites around the district, is really that the last time we did a review, and it was probably 5 years ago, Carl, would that be right? 5 or more years ago?
2015, yes, was the last full review.
2015. As far as I'm aware, and I wasn't involved too much in it, but we didn't receive comments from iwi about the sensitivity to dogs in some of these areas. And I'm just thinking immediately about Kakipuku, Lake Naroto, and yesterday we even had comments about Lake Tikuutu and the feeling about dogs in those places. And so council, I suppose, made decisions without taking into account those cultural perspectives. And when you look at our dog control bylaw, there are dog prohibited areas for a lot of, for argument's sake, cemeteries. Now, the public has said they don't want dogs in cemeteries, but nobody came back and referred through to the Urapa and things like that and other sites in some of these other areas. So effectively, we've worked through a process and decided through public comment where people can take their dogs and where they can't. And I suppose realistically, the public, and there's a lot of people with dogs out there that want to take them for a walk. So when we open this up, we're going to get a lot of debate from people who say, yes, we want to take dogs in these areas. And we need some good justification for saying, well, actually, it's a dog prohibited area.
I understand all of that, but you know, let's go back to the paper, and the paper is about Hakepuku.
Yeah.
And you said, Jim, at the top of it, it's already dog restricted. They're not allowed there.
That's
you
right.
guys have bought some land that butt into that. Then I'd like to believe that the rules of that dog not allowed covered your one as well.
It doesn't.
Then I think, and this is only my perspective, is that it's a council who needs to do something about this dog prohibition.
Yeah.
I think you guys need to look at, now that you've got this reserve land, is that you make the same rules as the top to make it easier. So it's a simple thing is about how does the council put that into play to make it all around. Your reserve, the other reserve is all dog free, and work with the iwi or the marae about how best it's done. Because at the end of the day, you know, the guys, we are talking about cultural here, And Jim, we go through a lot of things around cultural. This is just another one of those little things that we have a misunderstanding around between iwi and mainstream. And it's important that we work together around getting it right.
Yep.
It can't be that hard. This is what it's all about at the end of the day.
Through your worship, when is the next review due?
Where's Carl gone?
Yep. 2025 is the date that it must be reviewed before. So we have a requirement to review every 10 years in this case. So we have to have it done before 2025. So
in your annual review, you can't put in a submission pointing out these issues, because I picked up on ngā roto, which we have been saying for a while, and about making that a prohibitive area. Takapuka sounds like another issue, but I know there are annual reviews, but these particular policies you're talking about, is there any way of moving something where you can actually bring those reviews forward?
Yeah. So Barney, that's and when you look at Carl's report, he's left some gaps there for this committee to make recommendations to council, and I would assume that out of this committee, there's going to be a recommendation that actually council does a review of its dog control policy earlier than the 5 years or the 10-year period. So started almost immediately. So look, I'm not putting words into anyone's mouth, but is that the sort of flavour of where people want to go?
Oh, definitely. Just from my viewpoint, definitely.
Kia ora tātou.
Yeah,
now, it's been a long time since the subject was raised, and it was raised by formerly at Te Kōpua by George Waraki Teruhi Senior, our then chairman of Te Kōpua Marae, long serving. He's just recently retired after 30 long years of service. You finally let him have a rest. And the chairmanship has changed somewhat, but certainly not the determination by Ngāti Unu, Ngāti Kahu to see dogs off the mountain. That's not going to change. And anytime soon or ever, we've made that determination going forward. And as the leading chief of Ngāti Unu, Ngāti Kahu, we do as we're told by our people, and that's what they want. I want that off. Now, how that works inside a review against the majority public, I don't know. But all I know is that at the marae end, we're standing on our tino rangatiratanga, on our mana motuhake, in respect of this as treaty partners or underneath the treaty framework. So that's where this has arisen, or was first outed probably a year ago, I think, Jim.
A bit more than that, Shane, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A bit more than that, but anyway, processes are what they are, and we have had a full month or so holiday with COVID in between, which has made things difficult for everyone all around. But 5 years does seem a way off for this particular subject. Yeah.
The other thing, Jim, I want to bring up is way back in 2009 when the reserve was made a recreation reserve. I think we'd sent a letter to council informing them that we'd never ever been informed that it was going to be a recreation reserve. And one of the things that we talked about way back then, 2009, was why couldn't it have been changed to a scenic reserve, the same as the one that DOC has. I think it's a scenic reserve, but to have the same classification as that, rather than as a recreation reserve. I mean, way back then, I think we sent some stuff to Tony, but we didn't really get any replies around that. So we'll just leave that there. But this has been going for a few years now. I think we were first approached for some support from the Kakapuku Conservation Kakapuku Conservation Committee. They were concerned. Their concern was that often people go up there with their dogs off the leash, and then they don't stop there because they really want to get to the top. So they don't leave their dog tied up down below. They take their dogs up to the top, right to the top, and that was a concern for them. And that's when we actually realised the situation, and we've been speaking to you or sending letters to you backwards and forth for the last few years.
In addition to what Auntie Wine said on behalf of Unu and Kahu, we note that our bones are up there in various places. Our wāhi tapu, the whole place is a wāhi tapu to us in varying degrees, depending on what has happened there. That's our ukaipo, that's our home base, is Kakapuku, which has been for Unu and Kahu. And the many marae, the many ridges have all been places of occupation from time to time on that mountain. And so for us, the fact that we do have bones still interred on the mountain, and that has been a place for hahu for the burials of generations of Unu and Kahu, and their bones disinterred from the mountain and moved to different places. And also our papaewe, our place where the afterbirth have been hidden in various places along the mountain in different spots, and also a kohuna for pito, a hiding place for the dried umbilical cords of babies. So from birth to death, that is our place up there on that particular mountain, more so than any of the other sites in and around that area. Hence, we have such a strong objection that won't change to and abhorrence to seeing dogs loose on the area, not only because of the works that have been carried out by those who have planted trees, etc., but also the encouraging of wildlife, etc., in those areas. But the cultural importance of Kakapuku to Unu, to Kahu, and to the other hapu, and invariably to other iwi who have from time to time occasioned in that place, is huge.
Yeah. Okay. So look, just a question to you, Carl. Can we review our policy in part, or does the whole policy have to be reviewed?
No, the legal advice that we were given was that because this is what they consider to be a significant change, because it changes the rights that people enjoy at the moment, that it triggers a review of the entire policy. And unfortunately, in this case, when the policy was drafted, and this policy goes back before 2015 to at least 2011 in its current form, the schedules that dictate those places are actually included as part of the policy, and they were deliberated in conjunction with the policy. So essentially, it's all one document. So the whole thing gets reviewed.
So okay, so taking a lead from the committee members who have spoken, that the recommendation is that council review its dog control policy as soon as possible, and definitely before the 2025 deadline. Is that what I'm hearing from everybody?
Yes, there's two things for me anyway. Is apart from the dog policy, is it easier to change the
status
recreation reserve to a scenic reserve, the same as the dock reserve, and that would eliminate dogs anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, interesting. That's not a process that I've given any thought to, but I'm not sure. Gary Knighton, is that anything you'd be able to comment on in terms of a process with DOC?
No, I'm not really. That would be a Sally I have had some discussions with the Parks team around this, so as to whether we could vest the land with DOC, but it doesn't sound like DOC are taking on any extra lands, so the Parks team didn't think this would be a viable option.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks,
Look, we can make some inquiries about that outside of the dog control issue. And look, I was involved in actually purchasing that piece of land when it became available, and it was obviously an opportune time to buy it and start retiring some of that steeper hill country for reserve purposes. So the intent from council was good. Whether we've got the right reserve classification, we probably need to have a look at. But in terms of the dog control issue, then I think that we just need a resolution from this committee to actually get on and do a review of our dog control policy. And if we do that, then we need to be alert to the fact that there could be other areas. We don't want to be in this position for some other site that comes up that has been missed again. So when we do the review, we want to make sure that we get every site that is possibly wrong now on that list of no dogs permitted in those areas. So is that a fair summary where we're up to?
Yeah.
All right. So although there's 3 bullet points there that have just got gaps, it's only just the one. I suppose it's 2 issues, isn't it? One, that we want to review the dog control policy as soon as practical, and 2, investigate the change of the reserve classification.
Yes, that's right.
That's fair comment?
Yes, that's fair comment.
Okay. All right. So look, can I have a mover and seconder for that, and then we can put it through? Wire and Barney.
Yeah.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Contrary. Oh, sorry. Yep.
Sorry. So one, is that my Zoom or your Zoom that does that?
I don't know what you've. Oh, hang on.
Oh, she's put it up.
Yeah. Never mind. But one, I'll ask at the Department of Conservation Board, because I'm on that board, from a Māori perspective, about the classification of that reserve. But the other issue that I find in this, and in the report, it says in 2015, there were no submissions received in respect of the Kakepuku Maunga specifically. But I can remember that Ngāri Tōku have talked about this dog thing on Kakepuku for many years. But I think what's happening here is that we actually don't put any submissions in ourselves when it comes out publicly. We haven't done that since Lynn Murray was alive.
Yeah.
Yeah, since the Waikato Eoc development, where we used to, when she was doing it, we did it then, but we no longer do it anymore. But we probably need to put in a submission.
Yeah, I think that's right, Gayleen. I think we just we do need to formalise it. So Sam just put up that those 2 recommendations. So I had a mover and seconder for them. And can I just include that the item A there as well, that we receive Carl's report, so that as long as the mover and seconder are happy with that.
Yeah.
So it'll be A, B1 and 2.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, is everyone happy with that?
Yes.
All right, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Contrary? Carried. Thanks for that, Carl.
No, thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate that guidance, and we'll work towards those resolutions.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Oh, Carl, just before you, we just need to get council. You're obviously going to have to get a costing and everything sorted out. So this is a recommendation that goes to the council. So yeah, don't start spending any money yet.
No, recommendation from this committee to SPMP, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carl.
Thank you.
Okay, item 9. strategy-led organisation, and who's running this? Is Haven, is it?
Yep.
Yeah, Haven.
Cool. Okay. Kia ora koutou, and thanks, Mayor Jim. Hey, I've got the presentation here ready to go, and if I just try and share it through my screen, that's probably the best way to approach this.
Yep.
Cool.
Yes, thanks, Haven.
All right, are you guys seeing what I've got up there? Not sure I can try and make it full screen, but
Oh, yeah.
it doesn't work like that. Okay, so yeah, kia ora koutou. I'm Haven Walsh. I'm in the strategy team with Council. I've been here about 2 years, and I'm here to give a bit of an update on how Council is looking to be a strategy-led organisation and how that's primarily delivered through the long-term plan. So I'll just try and click through there. So yeah, we'll talk about those two things, and then if anybody's got any questions that they come up, I'm happy to try and address those at the end. Normally, Kirsty Downey, my manager, who you may or may not have met previously, would lead this presentation with me, but today, well, unfortunately, she had other commitments that she couldn't get to, so I'll be the one taking us through this. So in terms of becoming a strategy-led organisation, the Council's developing the foundations so that it can work with its communities and elected members, and the Council can lead with purpose and have a clear line of sight from what we do on a daily basis back to the vision or what we're trying to achieve as a Council. So important to that is developing what we're calling an integrated strategic planning framework. So I'll get to that on the next slide, but it kind of just tries to articulate how everything we do links back to delivering on that vision. The reason that we're doing this is because we're trying to, we've had a lot of changes go on in the district, and we want to be able to plan and provide for growth in those changes in a way that is collaborative, efficient, effective, and maybe take on a more facilitative role. So yeah, that all really starts with having a real clear vision and community outcomes, or a vision for the district and the community outcomes in terms of what we're trying to achieve and how we're trying to shape the district. So what we've done is we've gone out through a bit of a process to work with our community and check in on that vision and community outcomes. I think it's fair to say that the current ones we've had for a while, I think it was originally developed about 12 years ago, and a lot of the strategies that inform the work we do, they were also developed about 10 years ago. So we've kicked off a process to check in on that vision, check if it's still right, and then figure out the priorities for the district and redevelop the strategies so that when we work through our projects and come up with our ideas, we know they're aligned with what the community is seeking. And having that all in place will ensure that everything we're doing does give effect to the vision. It's not intended that we're going to achieve this all overnight. What we're doing is trying to lay the foundations so that over the next 3 or 4 years, we can deliver an LTP in 2024. That is what we're calling the transformational LTP. But we'll get to that a bit later in the presentation. So I did mention the integrated strategic planning framework to try and just show how all this links together. So at the top there, you'll see the vision. So Council's vision was up the top there, Waipa, home of champions, building the future together. Then we've got the second layer down, the community outcomes. And then the third layer below that is the external strategic priorities. So those kind of set the Council strategic direction. The first two, the vision and the community outcomes, are kind of longer term 10-year, the longer term 10-year visions that we're trying to achieve. And then the priority areas are what we're focusing on every 3 years. So we review those when we prepare each long-term plan. Below that is all the key strategies and plans. And then we've also got internal strategic priorities that are reviewed every year. And then below that are kind of the mechanisms that give effect to all that. So things like the long-term plan, the district plan, yeah, our JMAs, those kind of things. All right, so in terms of the long-term plan, We already have one. This is our current one for 2018 to 2028. We're currently reviewing that to have a new one for 2021 to 2031. So although they're 10-year documents, they do have to get reviewed every 3 years. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this already, but I'll give a bit more detail about the long-term plan and what it is. So its purpose is simply to describe the community outcomes that Council is looking to achieve, detail all the activities and services that we are providing to give effect to those community outcomes and visions. It seeks to give a long-term focus. So yeah, it's got all the projects that we're going to be involved in for the next 10 years. But it's also got longer term thinking in there in terms of the infrastructure strategy. So that kind of talks about how we're going to manage all the infrastructure throughout the district for at least the next 30 years. But some of that infrastructure is quite long lived. And if we look after it well, it could last in perpetuity. So it does try to take quite a long term focus. And when it's prepared, it tries to provide for integrated decision making. So this is when all the budget managers work together, figure out what projects we need to put in there to give effect to the vision, and look for ways that they can dovetail on each other so that there's sort of efficiency. So if there's a project happening in a certain space, it would be good for say the roadie manager and the parks manager to both be across where that's happening and when, and see if they can deliver it in more of an efficient way. And of course, the long-term plan is a key kind of document that gives accountability. The community can use to see accountability from the council. So it says what we're going to do, and it gets checked in, and they can use that to see if council has actually done what it says it's going to do. So in terms of the planning cycle, I mentioned previously that the long-term plan gets reviewed every 3 years. In between that 3-year cycle, there's an annual plan that's prepared. And if we're significantly deviating from what's in the long-term plan, then there'll be a consultation process. If there's not much changing, then there may not be a consultation process as part of those annual plans. And at the end of every year, there's an annual report that's audited. So there's a bit of this long-term plan cycle. Where are we at with our current LTP? So back in 2019, key staff met with elected members and agreed an approach for preparing the current LTP. It recognised that the current one is quite ambitious. There's a lot of work going on to try to account for all the growth, putting in core infrastructure, and it's quite a full LTP. So the agreed approach was essentially to carry that over for the next 3 years as much as possible. Of course, there'll be new things come in as they always do, but in essence, try and just carry over the current LTP as much as possible and try and set ourselves up to develop that transformational LTP in 2024. So with that in mind, we have agreed with elected members to maintain the current levels of service. So everything council does in terms of running its libraries, looking after the roads and water, we've agreed to try and deliver the services at the same level. So they shouldn't be delivered to a higher level or a lower level, just continue with the current levels of service. We've engaged with the community on the vision, the community outcomes, and those priorities, and I'll talk to that a bit more shortly. And we're also currently attending hui with mana whenua throughout the district. So yeah. So in terms of engaging with the community on the vision, the community outcomes, and the strategic priorities, we've primarily done that through a series of neighbourhood barbecues throughout the district. So there were 6 scheduled, but unfortunately 2 of them got impacted by the COVID pandemic, and we couldn't have the one that was scheduled to happen at Ohaupo or the one for the Balloons over Waipa event. But we did hand out thousands of sausages through those events and a lot of survey forms to try and garner the community's feedback on what their aspirations are for the district and what they want council to focus on in the coming years. And we've used that to reframe our vision, our community outcomes, and our priorities so that we can set ourselves up to try and deliver those. So yeah, lots of great discussions at those barbecues. But we also did an online survey to try and contact more people outside of the barbecues, and we received feedback online from them. So yeah, we took all their responses, packaged it up, and used that to inform some decision making. And what did we hear on the vision? So in terms of the current vision for Waipa, Home of Champions, building the future together.
Oh, hate it.
Generally, what we found out was that the vast majority of people either liked it or loved it. So 28% of people loved it and 38% of people liked it. Yeah, just a small minority of people hated it at 4%. So with that in mind, we had a pretty clear idea that we were on the right track with our vision. In terms of the community outcomes, the next layer down, so there's been amendment to the LGA, which has reintroduced wellbeing and the 4 wellbeing domains back into the Act, being cultural, environmental, economic, and social wellbeing. And we've heard what that means for our communities. And we also heard back from our communities on what they would like us to focus on for the next sort of 3 years. So we got feedback, not just from those barbecues, but also we undertook some targeted stakeholder engagement. So in terms of the community feedback, the focus areas were building vibrant communities, promoting the use of te reo in our communities, attracting domestic and international visitors, and preparing for climate change. And in terms of the more targeted stakeholder feedback, where we engage with groups directly, we heard from them that promoting connections and health and via physical infrastructure was important, that sustainable resource use is important, developing a vision for culture and heritage in the district is important, and that retail and Main Street survival was important. So that last one there just highlights the fact that that stakeholder engagement happened after the pandemic. So in front of, at the forefront of people's minds was the need to how we're going to get through this pandemic and recover economically. So we've taken all that feedback and tested it with our leadership team and our elected members. And where we've landed is not having wholesale changes to our vision or community outcomes, but just some tweaks to try and clarify a few things. So I'll just run you through where we've got to now. So now our current vision is Waipa, Home of Champions, building connected communities. So that kind of picks up on the fact that a lot of what we heard back was about building connections and being collaborative and taking more of a facilitative approach to try and deliver all of the things council needs to do. So we've tried to build that into our vision with the word connected there. In terms of the community outcomes, that next layer down, we've kind of mirrored the Local Government Act really, and we've got cultural champions, socially resilient, environmental champions, and economically progressive. And from the feedback we've got on our priority areas for the next 3 years, we've got creating vibrant communities, leading the recovery of Waipa, nurturing and respecting our unique culture and heritage, effectively planning and providing for growing communities, and preparing for climate change. So we should see those 5 areas come through when we prepare our current long-term plan. So yeah, with that, we've reviewed the vision, community outcomes, and strategic priorities. These were formally adopted by Council on August 25th, so just recently. And now we're working with our executive team and elected members to prioritise the business cases that will go into the long-term plan in a way that's going to give effect to those to the vision, the community outcomes, and those priorities. Okay, and we will then. That will inform our draft LTP and our consultation document. And we'll look to release that for audit in early 2020 after it formally gets approved by Council in December. And then we'll undertake a formal consultation with the community also in early 2020. So I know I probably threw a lot of information at you there. So I'm happy to open up for any questions and try and answer anything if you've got any questions.
Thanks, Haven. Okay, are there any questions? Bruna? Happy with that?
Haven, how long ago did that slogan come in, Home of Champions? and how reliant, so from when it come into to now and going forward, how, what's the word I'm looking for, guys? Is that wording, that slogan appropriate now?
Yeah, so I think it came in 2008. So
in the rowing,
19,
when the rowing came in.
It came in when those sisters won. Those sisters won the rowing. Yeah,
okay,
yeah. And so if you look at then and take away a little bit of a gap, how long has it been since we've delivered some champions to tick that box?
Yeah, so I guess the idea is it's trying to feed through into everything. So champions, we're trying to be champions in terms of our, not just sports and the way that we deliver sports in the district, but we're trying to be champions environmentally, culturally. It's kind of the aspiration that we're trying to seek. In terms of judging it and seeing how successful we are, I guess that kind of comes down to the next layers, the community outcomes, and how we measure those through our long-term plan. I'm not sure if I've really answered your question there, but
so Katarina, I suppose just quickly in terms of I think Haven has answered it, but every Olympic, Commonwealth, World Championship, we're continually on the sporting field turning out gold and medal winners right across the board. So I suppose in the cycling, rowing, canoe racing fields, but it's not only that, it's equestrian. But I think it's a brand image, and I think it is a target that we want to aim to aspire to, and not just in those sporting fields. And when you look at some of the other projects that we do in Waipa, we, I think, can fairly claim to be champions, and it's certainly a brand image that other people or other organisations covet. So I'm personally pretty keen to retain it, but interested in your comments as to why. I don't know whether you're one of those 4% or
not at all, not at all. So what I'm looking at is that was 12 years ago. We've got a different generation of people. So all I'm making sure of is that particular slogan is still vibrant and still relevant to the people that we are coming in today. And this is for the long-term plan. So going forward, a lot of us who were there in that time is now giving way to a lot more other people, different people, younger people, Māori, blah, blah, blah. So whatever the slogan we're using for Waipa needs to be multicultural in itself. And if, for instance, I came into the town and looked at, oh yeah, Rma champions, and then I don't know what that means or who the champions were, where do I go to look at all of that? You know, find all of that. Who were those champions? Why are we saying that? So that's the corridor behind what I'm asking. I'm just looking at the wider picture. I don't say, I loved it when it came out because it was really brilliant. It did work for the time that the ladies and all of those people were champions, and it was well deserved at that time. I'm not saying change it. I'm saying how vibrant, how reliant is it today going into the next future with the generation gaps you're having today. And where is that Māori perspective around that, you know? This is a multicultural town. It's getting more multicultural every time you walk outside on the street. When I first come here, I had to look really hard for other colors of people. So that's all I'm saying, Haven, you know. We're trying to sell Waipa.
Yeah,
and that's a good sell for me back from 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Going forward, where's the backup for those words?
No, you make a good point. So every 3 years, we always review the priorities, but we don't necessarily always review the vision and the community outcomes. So it may be important that we do check in on those a bit more regularly going forward. And I'd also say some of the conversations I had when we went out and had the neighborhood barbecue kind of thing, the Homer Champions really resonated with people, and they could really clearly link it to Cambridge, but perhaps linking it to some of the wider parts of the district wasn't always quite as clear. So I think we might have some work to do to try and to spread that out across the district a bit more and regularly check in on it.
That's what I'm asking.
I think just to pick up from Haven, you know, it's not, you know, and I think Jim has said it's not just about sporting champions. It's like, you know, anyone can be a champion in this community. You know, you do something for a community group, or, you know, it's just trying to get that sort of community cohesion, you know. But there are lots of other examples as well.
I saw Gayleen and then Harold.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll put my hand up. I was part of the champions discussion 12 years ago. And I had a lot to say then, but I'm all good now. But that's not my question. So in your report, you've got elected members. I'm not having a go at you. What does that mean?
Elected members as in our councillors.
And community board, Haven?
Yeah, community board, yeah. Councillors and community board members.
So Jim, the next agenda item is managing strategic partnerships. It's all about iwi partnerships.
Yeah.
So when we get to that, I'm going to ask, so why isn't iwi part of this?
Haven, in terms of consultation, we have been doing a lot. So do you want to just cover that off?
Yeah, so at the moment.
But just to answer your question, Gayleen, elected is what is the statutory provision, I suppose. It's who is elected, and that is, from a council point of view, it's the councillors and the community board. Haven, do you just want to cover off the consultation?
Yeah, just where we're at now. We're actually, we've been out meeting with iwi and hapu in our district to try and link in and see how our priorities link in with their priorities. So just trying to understand best how we can give effect to that and make sure that we're both getting the right kind of outcomes. So it's starting with meetings, and then we'll try and refine down, look at their strategic documents, and then feed those into our reviewed strategies. So I mentioned earlier that we're reviewing all our outdated strategies. There's a 10-year-old environment strategy. There's a 10-year-old economic development strategy. So now we have those strategic priorities. A lot of iwi and hapu have their own strategic documents. We want to look for the crossover between those, and then develop those council environment economic strategies, spatial plan in a way that gives effect to everything, so that next transformational 2024 LTP tries to give effect to everyone's aspirations.
So that's not answering my question, Jim. So it says it's led by elected members and staff, and then you said community boards too. But what Haven just talked about is the consultation process to iwi. But this has actually been led by elected members. And so I'm only asking that because we have iwi members that are on council committees, and we're going to increase that. What does that mean for them in this strategy?
Gayleen, they'll form part of the committees and will have all of the rights and voting capability that elected members have. But in terms of their, I suppose, legal status, they still won't be elected members because they're appointed rather than elected.
But do they become part of this group or not? That's what I'm getting at, not the elected members. Do the iwi members that are on committees of council, will they be part of this group?
Oh yeah, look, absolutely, Gayleen. The intention is that they are full part of those committees and take part in all of the discussions and are treated just the same as elected members.
Okay, it's just a wording thing that Haven has in his report then. All good, thank you.
Okay, Harold, were you wanting to say something?
Yeah, just in terms of what Tatarana was talking about, Samir. When I first saw it, it tanged me. And I thought, what's wrong with that sign? It talks about achievement past. And as Gailey, as Katarana started speaking, I thought, it's right. What I'm referring to here, if I were to leave that behind, there's no heritage for the next generation to achieve to, because your sign says it's already been achieved. So what I'll suggest is, why don't we stick something in front of it, like building a home of champions? And that what that will do, that'll incorporate those ones that have achieved and create an incentive for those that haven't. Just a suggestion, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Harold. Certainly puts a positive spin on it.
Yeah, I like it. Well done, Harold.
Okay, that's something for us to look at and consider for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so is there any other questions for Haven?
No,
All right,
I look forward
can I
to
just
the
have a
comments.
mover and seconder to receive that
Yeah.
report? Harold and Galen, all those in favour?
Yep.
Aye.
Contrary, carried. COVID recovery, and
I'll pick that one up, Your Worship.
oh, Gary, thanks. Yep.
Yep. So Debbie, my tag team on this as well. Yep, just really wanted to pick up from the item at the last committee meeting around the COVID recovery and what we're doing there. So this is, I guess, been through Strategic Planning and Policy Committee now, and I guess the key elements that we are looking at as part of that recovery are the establishment of a $400,000 fund for recovery purposes, so social purposes, appointing of 2 community advisors, so that 2 advisors that will will get deeply into the community networks and assist with getting groups to collaborate, helping organisations just find resources, fundraise, and just generally collecting intelligence of what is happening in the community. We fully expect we're not seeing the worst of COVID's effects yet, so it'd be important just to keep that together and also to link with other agencies. So those 2 positions are out. Just advertising, I think, has just commenced on those, and yeah, so also investing $120,000 odd into promotion, district promotion and events promotion as well, and that all comes from that's not from ratepayer funding, it's from our arbitrage fund. So just around the allocation of the $400,000 fund, expected to be in 2 tranches. First will be by application and open to charitable groups and social groups, marae, etc. And the second round would be by invitation, and when community advisors get on board, they'll sort of be working across those organisations, identifying good projects that we might be able to utilise for the second round of that funding. The fund will be allocated via a working group, and at the moment, the membership we're looking at that is 2 councillors, being Deputy Mayor and Chair of Strategic Planning and Policy, iwi Relations Advisor Shane, a manager of a community development fund, a community philanthropic fund, so probably someone from Trust Waikato, 2 mana whenua reps and 2 community sector leaders. So and be looking for some feedback from the committee about appointment of those mana whenua reps. Sorry, just getting a bit of interference there. Yeah, so that's pretty in a nutshell. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Debbie.
No, that sounds good, thank you. I guess the other thing to signal is that we've had requests for to have some representation in terms of recruitment on the recruitment panel for the community advisors. So would appreciate your thoughts on having a rep for that as well.
Yeah, okay, so I suppose council was really concerned that although we're getting economic reports and employment issues on a general sense, that we really needed to get into the community in a detailed way so that we can target some support, because we all, I suppose, anticipate that we haven't seen the worst of this COVID impacts both socially and economically on the community. So yeah, look, open for any comments and names, I suppose, that Gary and Debbie are looking for as suggestions. Gayleen.
Same thing, same question. You know, 2 iwi, 2 mana whenua. What does that mean? You can decide. But the other thing is the sporting groups, can they fall into that funding?
So the fund is targeted to COVID recovery. So if it was a project and initiative that contributed to recovery within the district, then possibly.
So Gayleen, one of the issues is, of course, that the areas that are being hardest hit are in the accommodation and tourism visitor sectors. So, you know, we are trying to encourage events back into the district, and when you consider how much investment that actually brings and job creation, it's really quite an important part of Waipa's economic background, I suppose. From the biggest at the field days through to Karapiro, but also a lot of other community events. And we're particularly wanting to target those events that are multi-day events, because that means people stay overnight and stay in accommodation and spend money around the district. So sporting events would definitely fall into that category.
Cool. Is this fund a one-off? Is it 519,000? So when it's gone, it's gone. Is that the case?
At the moment, Katarina, that is the case, right. Because as Gary has said, I think just briefly touched on it, it's utilising a fund that was put aside as a reserve through our arbitrage, which was really borrowing a lot of money through the local government funding agency and investing it back in the banks, and we were making a small margin on the investment. So yeah, without going back to council and rolling it over or increasing it in coming years, at the moment it's a one-off fund.
Okay. It's pretty hard there, Gary. On page 19, you've got 10 different iwi authorities or mana whenua, or whatever you like to call them there. And you've got 2 you want as a representative on this table. Wouldn't it have been easier for this particular committee to have gone to Ngā Iwi Tōpū Waipa and asked to look for 2 instead of trying to spread it around? Because you've got 10 different iwi in here. It's on page 19 in the long-term plan.
Yeah.
How are you going to do that?
Well, I guess that's where we're asking some advice. I can say Ngāti Karaiki Kahukura have already put their hand up that they'd be keen to for that side. And so that's why I was suggesting probably it'd be good to have, if we're going to have another one, then we should look over the Te Awamutu side of the district for that representative anyway.
If it's a comment really is that we're really looking for people that can offer support to the whole district. And I know it depends where, in some ways where people live, that they've got a better understanding of that community. But look, we're really looking for people that are going to try and support the whole district. And it is hard, Katarina, I agree, trying to select one or two members from various groups, but otherwise the committee will get so large that it'll be unwieldy.
I understand. I have no comment on how you're going to pick people.
Yeah. So, Galen.
So yes, so I think you should have a recruitment person in here. So if we were talking about marae and this funding, so there are some marae who would used to accommodate people that came to Te Amaru and Cambridge, but due to the COVID, that didn't happen. Does that apply or not? So I'm just trying to find out how marae would fit into that kind of funding.
Yeah, look, Galen, without a specific project, I really don't think I could to comment. But if the marae were looking at an activity that was going to aid in the recovery of the district, some social project that they had going, then definitely they would fit into that category. But it wouldn't be funding just to upgrade marae, if that's what you're thinking about.
No, it wasn't. It's that, sometimes when we had sports events, the marae would get utilised as an accommodation. So there were some marae that were used just for accommodation, for events that are held in Te Amaru, but through the COVID, that didn't occur.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be used to cover that kind of thing, but so an example of the kind of thing that it could be used for, I think, for example, one of the groups we met with, we're talking about developing gardens and looking at food resilience. So it might be a project that contributes to that, or there might be a project which contributes to employment. So if there are employment programs where we're getting people into work, it might be a project that contributes to that. So it's that kind of thing, things that grow the resilience and help us address the economic issues that are being faced by our communities.
Oh, thank you. You just solved my garden problem. Awesome.
Good. Okay. Any other questions? So look, I suppose, Gary, you're looking for some names. If we can't get them, obviously today, but if somebody has got some suggestions, phone them through to you or email them through. Would that be?
Yeah, absolutely
helpful?
That'd be great. Thanks.
So can you just put your thinking caps on, and if you think of somebody in the community that would be good for this role, I suppose, to help us try and get a good cross section of the community, then give Gary a call or email him or something. It'd be really helpful. Okay, if there's no other questions, can we just have a mover and seconder to receive that report? Susan and Katarina, all those in favour?
Aye.
Contrary, carried. Now, Civil Defence Emergency, Dave, I see is here, Dave Symes. Kia ora, Dave, thanks for coming along. Shall I just hand it over to you?
Unmute, Dave.
You're on mute, Dave. You're still on mute.
This is Jim Milcreast. He's bloody good at curing. I like his style because he's an ex-engineer.
Hey, Barney, you're not on mute.
Yeah.
Dave, you're on mute.
Sam, unmute him.
Can you unmute him, Sam? Or
I'm trying to. I'm sending a request to ask him to unmute, but it doesn't seem to be working.
No.
I can mute people, but I can't
There he is.
unmute them,
Oh,
unfortunately.
there he
Yeah,
is.
I'm there now. So,
What
sorry,
happened?
I was on a different screen. I couldn't get out of that screen.
Okay. You're live now, Dave. We can all hear you.
Okay, kia ora koutou to everyone. Thanks for the invitation. Obviously, my report has gone through the quarterly report, and there's a lot in it. If I could just sort of touch on the base of that report, it's at a national, regional, and also local level. So we try to include everything in that quarterly report. Probably the two most, or the most topical thing is obviously around COVID-19 over the last quarter, well nearly 6 months now. But there are a couple of other things I want to touch on before we get to that were quite significant for our area. So the first one is around the administrative, the renewing of our shared service agreement. So that came up, that's I guess for civil defence emergency management, the shared service arrangement is between Waipa, Aotearoa and Waitomo councils. So there's two of us that are employed with that, and we work across all three councils, managing civil defence and emergency management. So the other thing around, so that's the structure that we work across, just so there's some understanding around that. Just moving on to the events. Aside from COVID, probably the biggest event that we've had was earlier in the year was around the drought. And there were two parts to that. So so one of them was around, I guess, our town supply and the water shortages, and especially in Te Awamutu. So that was the lack of water in the dam, and I guess we got to, I think it was level 4, which was the highest in the region. Luckily, I guess the rains came, and I guess that solved that problem. But just as much, which people weren't really aware of, aside from the town supply, was the tanked water supply to people, which was obviously outside of council and outside of council's responsibility, but within civil defence and emergency management, that was significant, in that we had vulnerable people out there that were very close to completely running out of water. And I guess the issue was around, there was the ability to get water to them, but actually the trucking firms or the water supply people were overrun with demand, and there was an inability to meet that demand over a very short period of time. So I think, I guess the way forward around that is some of our messaging to those people on tank water supply around building some resilience, I guess booking in and considering, that we might have another drought next year or the year after is what does that look like, and then working with those water suppliers as well. But that was quite a significant event, and actually even through COVID, that remained up through other parts of the Waikato region, certainly Thames Coromandel area as well. Any questions around that before I sort of touch on COVID? Okay, so COVID-19, obviously a national state of emergency. So the most, you just touched on it with recovery. So that was on the 25th of March. Our Western Waikato EOC was established the following day to manage, I guess, there were kind of 3 parts to that. So that was, I guess, leading and coordinating the non-health consequences of COVID-19 across our Western Waikato area, supporting DHBs to deliver their health response, and I guess providing some leadership and reassurance to communities through making sure that the comms, the communication, the public notifications were getting through to all communities. So it was really a health-led event, certainly supported by civil defence. And obviously where we came in as one of the arms of the welfare response was administering some of that funding, government funding, through to those vulnerable people by supporting I guess, food banks, iwi distribution centres, those sorts of things, and setting processes around that. So some things, I guess, we did quite well. There's been a full, I guess, review on it. There's always things that you can do better, and I guess take into account, I guess, the meeting this morning. I mean, some of the review was certainly around, I guess, involvement of iwi and within our response there, and there was certainly some learnings that we took from that. I thought our engagement with iwi was good once we got going, but certainly acknowledged that where we can, I guess, make some gains and improvements is for us to understand, who the correct representative should be within our EOC, not only in the response, but in readiness, and at what level, those people that iwi that we're understanding that are putting through to build those relationships. In addition to that, so falling out of that debrief, there's some good work. I think there's a workshop next week. I'm not sure some of you may be involved with that, where I guess we start to look at those things. So those learnings out of how we managed COVID-19, should we get a resurgence? We've already had one, I guess, and that's our preparation now, is our planning around resurgence. Should we get something, similar to the Auckland situation within one of our district council areas, and we're required to go into a regional lockdown very similar to what we saw in Auckland. So that's kind of where our planning's at, and making sure that, I guess, we're working with iwi around that. The rest of the report is given that they're kind of the things that jump out at me, Your Worship, Mr. Chair. So
thanks, Dave.
Take questions.
Yeah, that's probably the best. If there are any questions or comments on how other people felt that the emergency response went. Has anyone got any concerns, or were there people out there missing out? We didn't certainly hear of them. Dave, would be a fair comment.
No, yeah, definitely. So when we made sure, I guess, that iwi once we got iwi coming into our EOC briefings in the afternoon, representatives, I mean, that was the opportunity for us to actually cover, some of that ground, make sure that there were no people missing out, or we understood what was actually going on in those communities. And we got better at that as we went on. I think we were probably lucky it was a long event over months, really. So it gave us that opportunity to actually form those relationships too, and something to build on.
Thanks, Dave. Anyone have any comments? Gayleen?
Of course, it's me.
You're right.
Dave. So there was some reporting by some of the iwi that the communication wasn't the greatest through the civil defence out to them. If anything, it took longer to get it. And I don't know whether that was because who the report was supposed to be to, or what happened there. Yes. So I know that Roko gave some feedback that the comms wasn't the greatest, but it wasn't the greatest with the council either, about who to speak to on behalf of the Roko iwi. Yeah, so we had some issues around that communication. Actually, and we didn't really know what the civil defence or anybody was doing, other than what iwi was doing itself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably a fair comment, and that's probably I guess we were at around those workshops, and us understanding. I think there was Gik Māori or some iwi representatives at a regional level, and then obviously at a local level, we were, I guess, tasked with actually the operational arm of it. And I guess knowing at what level those decisions will be made, and as I mentioned at the start, having the right people at each of those levels. So our local EOC was very operational. There were some things that we would get asked, and we would go, well, actually, we're not in that decision. That's not our decision to make. But again, I think we got better at that. Certainly the public information management, it was difficult. So we were pushing it out through our social media, but like I noted that as well, going as one of the improvements is how do we actually get people to understand what we're doing and those important messages that are going out, not just the health messages, but certainly the information around where to go for, to get help for vulnerable people.
I can probably get to that too. So we had some lengthy discussions with Vanessa around the recovery, and so she did give us some feedback around the civil defence response then. So absolutely hear what you're saying, Gayleen. I think at the group level, one of the issues was that the reps around the table weren't the right people. And so things were quite slow to get going in terms of connecting with iwi. In terms of recovery, we're looking at following quite a different approach, but I'm pretty confident that I think we've probably learned some lessons going forward, and that I think if we were to go into another response phase now, things would be done quite a lot differently.
Oh, very good.
Barney.
It's great. Oh.
Hello, Tim. Yeah, I think it would be fair to say that one of the things that it did show up was how inaccurate our own registries were in terms of addresses and phone numbers, and a fair bit of internal organisation. And let's face it, not many could say that they were prepared for COVID-19. So that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing is that one of the terrible things that I found in the Auckland situation was how little notice we got of the second one, and just this heightened confusion. So communication is definitely one of the difficult things that would probably have to be lifted in terms of liaisoning and working with a whole lot of different groups. I think that's a fair point about who was developed. I mean, in our committee, many of them weren't used to working in the Waipa area, and so there was a little bit of inaction for a while. And also different groups were better resourced, in terms of the iwi. There were some iwi that were post-treaty and they're in a far better resourcing space than those that are in the pre-treaty space. So there were things in our review that I noted that we probably need to keep working on, is reviewing and also coordinating and facilitating the different positions as they work on. And so that although we pack it away now, as a school, and I'm talking in the school areas, we had to be able to revive those plans like overnight. And so it's something just to keep in consideration for Te Awamutu. Should a whole lot of people suddenly fly in on a plane in Hamilton and suddenly dump all the COVID issues on you, which is really what happened to us. And so I guess what I'm saying is that these committees really have to stay active in terms of reviewing and being prepared for such an event again.
Thanks, Barney. Harold, yeah.
Yeah, just a couple of, and this is just more for information, and it virtually confirms what you've already heard. And I support what Debbie has just said. We held a New Zealand Māori Council conference as soon as lockdown was lifted. And one of the strongest voices that came out in it was exactly about how Māori disconnected communities and outlying communities were disadvantaged. As close as Oklahoma, for example, were complaining about they were totally pushed aside because they weren't the appropriate people to speak with. And that's, I heard Debbie talk about, Oko was saying exactly the same thing. And I'm pleased also to hear that you've received or you've realised those errors and now are going to go forward in a different type of space. Just for your information, let me make it clear that our people's first call is their local community, which in 99.9% of the time is their marae. If ever you need to get in touch with our people, call their marae and they will give you everyone. And instead of going through a process that was set up without consideration for those communities, because this is going to happen again and mistakes will be made again. But I think if you target the right communities to be able to get to the people in need, you'll get there earlier rather than later. Because what we heard in the New Zealand Māori Council conference was that by the time it got there, you're too late. They had taken other steps that they could. And in some cases, they had gone right outside of their district, for example, from Taranui to Taupo, to get that very response that they weren't getting internally. So I'll just give that for information so that you're aware of the community that were disadvantaged by some of those things that happened. Yeah. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Howard, and thanks for those comments. And I suppose from a civil defence point of view, as much as you don't want to have emergencies happening in your area, the more you have, the better you get at it. And that's not a position that we want to get into. But just a comment I'd like to make as well is that it's a two-way street, I suppose. And whilst obviously our civil defence organisation getting in touch with the maraes is good, then the maraes should equally know how to get in touch with our civil defence organisation. So, and that's something that we potentially could work on. So rather than us, I suppose, from a civil defence point of view, trying to push out to the marae, at least if they know how to contact us immediately, that would be helpful as well, I would think. Dave, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the first things on the top of the list for the workshop, which is next week, which is the start of, I guess, will be ongoing to and address those things. So, no, that's awesome. Great feedback.
Yeah, look, I think, Dave, congratulations to you and your team, and I think to the country as well. You know, like we got through the worst of it, Barney, before the second lockdown, pretty well from a social welfare perspective. But look, we're going to yo-yo in and out of these circumstances for quite some time, I think. So we need to get it running as efficiently as we possibly can.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Hey, Dave, thank you for that. Unless there's any other questions or comments, we'll get a mover and seconder to receive Dave's report. And Barney and Susan, it was, I think. All those in favour?
Aye.
Contrary?
Aye.
Carried. Item 12 is a Te Arawai update. Debbie, are you handling this?
I believe Shane's going to talk to this, but I'm quite happy to chip in as when needed.
Where is he?
Okay.
Oh, here he is.
Sorry about that.
Do you have our report there?
Yep.
We put that up, I can't see it. Ahono, kia ora rā tātou katoa, te āhuatanga ki tā tātou hui, and te arawai. Now, for those of you who read the papers, etc., we will have noted that we have put te arawai aside due to all of the present trials and tribulations that come with COVID. We note that the pandemic has all but dried up the philanthropic funding streams and pools, and they've been reduced or certainly turned and focused on other areas of concern concerning the rebuilding of our nation, basically. And so with that in mind, we've been led after much discussion, debate, and I'm sure there've been a few tears around the table too, and hair pulling in respect of coming up with a final decision, which have been supported by our council. Yes, there is the report, please, Sam. So we should have all received the report and been through it, which basically outlines where we are in respect of Te Arawai. Oops.
Yep.
So as we've stated, we've had we're in the end process at the moment of ensuring that we put Te Arawai to rest for a few years. Also being aware that there is the opportunity, or should the opportunity for funding present itself, that we could rejig and bring the project forward again. We note that we've got one more meeting to discuss final details of the plan that we will go with, which is the modest option of 1,600 square meters or so. The aspirational model, if you like, or option, are far beyond our ability to pay for. It's got all the bells and whistles. However, the second option, or the reduced option, with the square meterage of around 1,633 square meters, I believe, that has the basis or the base requirements that we need in order to fulfill the promises that we've made around producing a fantastic museum that will showcase the New Zealand Wars, which took place here and shaped our part of the country, indeed the nation, shaped it into what it is now, rightly or wrongly, and that's what we're going with at this stage. Whanau he nui nā pō raruraru I puta mai, I taka mai ki runga ki te kaupapa, o tira ki runga ki a tātou katoa. Nō reira koe rā te whakaaro kei tēnei wā. Me he pātai a kōtau, tēnā whiua mai. If there's any questions, please ask, but the report itself is short and to the point.
Kia ora, Shane. Thank you for that. It's just a shame probably that we didn't call it a green project. we might have managed to get a bit more funding, but but never mind. So look, from my perspective, it's a project that's really dear to my heart, and would love to see it progress. And at the moment, we're obviously keeping our eyes and ears open for any opportunities for funding. Yeah. And if that happens to come forward, then obviously the project's back on the front burner again. So it certainly hasn't been lost by any means, but challenging times for everybody, particularly in the funding field.
Yeah, just want to convey again to everyone around the table, on our screens, wherever we might be, just how much work staff at WC Waikato District Council have put into this over a number of years. But certainly the intensity around decision making came this year in respect of COVID, and lots of meetings, lots of discussions, toing and froing in order for us to come up with the best that we possibly could. And also the integration into these conversations of external expertise from a number of different places. So it's a decision that's been, it's hard and hard one, but there we are. It's the best that we can offer going forward. And like Jim said, you know, should any of you win the lotto and smile with a measure of grace to the project, you'll be, I'm sure we can put your name across the door.
Absolutely guaranteed, especially if you're a $50 million winner. Okay, all right. So look, if there's no other comments or questions, mover and seconder to receive change report.
Yes,
and Barney and Y.
Yeah.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Contrary, carried. And item 13, Gary, is yours, is it?
That's right, Your Worship. Yep. Shall I make a start on that? Yeah, wanted to note that Council have included a performance measure in the Chief Exec's list of performance measures around developing a tangata whenua and council partnership model. So I guess that's really, for me, that's about having a good look at what the existing arrangements are. I think it was about 2013 when we last had a good look at those arrangements, and quite a lot has changed in the interim. We've got joint management agreements, a lot of legislative change, treaty settlements, I guess changed expectations, co-management, all sorts of things in that mix now. So it's timely to have a really good look at what our current arrangements are. And I think you know, one of the key drivers for this is that, you know, really I think everyone is feeling the strain of all that extra communication and deliberation that's going on, you know, right across the spectrum. So, you know, I think trust boards, mana whenua and council, we're all kind of experiencing that, and I think it's about looking for a you know, are there opportunities to improve the way we're partnering with iwi and mana whenua around all sorts of different issues. So just also noted there that you know, Galen may want to chip in on this as well, but Ngāwi Tōpū have been, I guess, going through a similar sort of exercise, just started last month or so, you know, looking what, I guess, you know, almost like a strategic plan, where is Ngāwi Tōpū going to as well. I think probably, I don't know, Galen, if you want to comment, but it doesn't, what we're doing at the moment doesn't seem to be sustainable in the long term. So we need to be looking at how we can do things, I guess, more in partnership, but also, you know, can we work cleverer? What resource is going to be needed to achieve that? So I guess, you know, looking at funding as part of that equation, what do we need to provide there? So it's an all, you know, quite a big mix of issues and a lot of kōrero to go around that. We haven't scoped out exactly what this will mean, you know, in terms of hui and the like, but we'll be trying to do that over the next month and get more of a picture on when we expect to be able to have those discussions. So, but really, I just wanted to put that on the table now, just to flag that it is something that we do need to, well, we've been told to turn our minds to. So yeah, certainly Shane and I, and Chuck will be scoping that up in the very near future.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Are there any questions of Gary? And obviously open for any comments, Gary, at any stage. Somebody
absolutely
wants to feed them through to you. Barney.
Yeah, Gary, as you're aware, there's at least 2 MOUs coming up that is going to make Waipa even more contestable, just like Koroki Kahukura has done in Cambridge. How do you intend to deal with that?
Oh, look, I think you're right, Barney. I think there is I guess, a demand that to have more of a one-on-one relationship with council across a number of hapu and iwi. I'm not quite sure what the answer is yet. But like you, I recognise it's an issue. Hopefully we can find the right balance there.
Absolutely, Gary, and in respect of the question, we're moving through a little bit of uncharted territory. It's a new experience both for Waipa District Council and also for iwi authorities and hapu that we begin to manifest that, I suppose, the treaty relationship at this level. And so it'll take a while, some new heads, some new thinking, and it's probably forging a way through that will look to satisfy both parties. How will we do that? Well, it needs to be underpinned by communication and by the treaty relationship itself. There's principles of partnership, etc. I think that's the way forward in this area. But it's a changing and dynamic field in which we're roving at the moment. It's going to get exciting. And less of an issue, more of an opportunity.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, well, thanks for that update, Gary. So just want to move on second to receive that information, and it's a work in progress. Yeah, Harold and Y, all those in favour? Contrary? Carried. So we've got 3 late items. Katarina, you had 2, the selection committee nominations and netball courts. You're on mute, Katarina. You're on mute.
Mute. So if you go to page 9 and 11, Gary said he had some update about that. I do believe the applications for that committee was supposed to be closing shortly. And when I last spoke to Gary, there wasn't a lot of applications, and I wondered if it hasn't grown any bigger, we should look at maybe extending it a little bit more. So Gary, update me.
Update. So closed yesterday. We got 10 applications in total. So 3 or 4 of those were people who sort of misunderstood the role. But I think there are 6 or 7 applications in there that are very, very good. So I think we're probably okay to proceed on that.
I guess my next question was around what are the next steps for the panel? Yeah, as I believe I'm on it. So I'd like to at least meet the rest of the panel, have a look at the applicants, have some discussions.
Yeah, look, so that's pretty much the next job to do. Is I've just got the CVs handed through, so I won't be obviously having any part in it, but I guess Shane will be convening that group. But we want to get onto that as soon as possible. It would be really great if we could get through that and get a recommendation to the September council meeting. So they'll need to be appointed through the council meeting at the end of September. I don't know if that's feasible, but it'd be wonderful if we could do that.
Well, let's go to
trying to give it a go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So sooner than later. Then, if I'm involved in the panel, I'd like to be brought up to scratch sooner than later.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So Katarina
that's
will.
okay, Jim. I'm happy with that feedback.
Yep. Good. And the netball courts.
The netball courts. My daughter is involved in the Te Aomatu Netball Association, and I talked to Gary because there's some rumors in the community about maybe or could be the moving or the closing of the courts. So I needed to go. I said to my daughter what Gary said, that that wasn't in the pipeline, but she needs to go back to the community who's asking these questions to give them a definite where it's going to next. So there's been, you know, little bits of corridor here and there because of the whatever we found there and whatever might have been happening around the dig around there and how it impacted on the netball court. So all I need to know, Jim, is one, is there something happening around the netball courts that they may need to move? And if they are not, that's all good. That's all we need to know.
Nothing, absolutely nothing that I've heard, Katarina. The netball courts, over the years, there's been discussions come up and go away purely because of the demand for the space there and just not having enough room. Yeah. But look, there's nothing that's come through council, to my knowledge, that would suggest that they're being closed or moved or anything like that. We couldn't afford to do it apart from anything else.
That's true enough, and they'll be happy with that.
Yep, that's like, sorry, Katarina, I just confirmed with Sally yesterday. So there's nothing on the cards there. There has been discussion. There was discussion in the Memorial Park reserve plan around potential other uses for that area. And I think there might have been some discussion that parking's an issue there and it'd be good to, you know, move it to another site. But like Jim says, there's nothing in our 10-year plan that would facilitate that. So it's not on the cards for some time.
Excellent. Thank you, Gary. And Jim, I'll advise them of that.
Yeah. Thanks, Katarina. And Gayleen, you had an item.
Nah, I already know what the answer is now, but I've got something else.
No, you can't substitute.
No, it's not something else. It was the agenda, the item before. Well, my Zoom dropped off. Come on, but it's not a question. It's just that I hope that now talk will be able to gel into Gary's paper.
Yeah, well, that was sort of the intention of that. That we should be working together on this. Yeah,
that'll be good. And who is the contact for the funding?
We haven't sort of got that out there yet, so that we. But as soon as we get that we'll advise you of that. But so we're talking about the recovery fund, Gayleen.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah. Yep. But if you got any questions, come back through me, and I'll keep you in the loop as we go along.
And you go, and the same with the position, the iwi position that was in the agenda today?
Yep.
That goes back to you too?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. See, that wasn't hard.
Not hard at all. Yep.
You're getting like George, Gayleen, with your late items.
Gayleen, just with respect to the PAR site, there's no activity on site, it's just a rumour again, is it? Or
no, he cut all the trees down. Do you know where that is, Jim? You know, it's just on the corner before you get to Parawera. Used to be a whole lot of pine trees up there, just across from Robin's house.
Yeah.
Well,
no,
below that is the PAR site. And so I talked to Kate Tangaroa from the bank. So the owner wants to put a motocross in there. So all of those that live out there don't want that to happen.
Yeah, Chuck and I had a look on, I think it might have been yesterday, and there's definitely, the PAR site is definitely marked where those trees are or were. Yeah. So, you know.
And that's where he wants to put his motocross.
Well, pretty sure he'd need a consent because you'd have to shift quite a bit of earth, I imagine. So.
Yes, he would. And then he'll have to consult with the neighbours.
Yeah.
Which is,
well, he'd probably need an authority from Heritage NZ as well if it's on a PAR site. But
then how did he manage to cut the trees down when there was a PAR site there?
They're pine trees.
Mm.
He milled the trees, eh? Did he mill the trees, Gayleen?
He milled the trees.
Oh, yeah. I know the one you mean.
Yeah.
Yes. because unfortunately, that's a bit like Kanitoki. They milled those trees up there as well, and we couldn't stop them because the land is private. In theory, so that land is still his land and the trees on it. I guess he wanted to make dollars out of it, but it's going forward what he does next, because those trees shouldn't be there anyway, not those trees.
But the site would have been in the historical places.
I know, they shouldn't have been allowed to plant trees.
Would have been there. But anyway, yeah, so.
Okay, Galen, I suppose the best thing is we're alerted to it now. We need to keep an eye on it, because if there is a resource consent required, we need to let the owners know if that's what the plan is.
He knows.
Yeah.
He knows that power site's there.
Yeah, no, it's just whether he knows he needs a resource consent for doing any other work there. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Were there any other comments, or that just about brings us to a close? And if not, I'll ask Shane to finish. Yep. Looking around the screen, I can't see anyone waving hands. Shane.
Ai, kia ora tātou katoa. Ono e rere tonu ana ngā mihi kia koutou. Ko te kōrero whakatūpato arahi anō ki rā ia tātou, kia haumaru te noho. Ko taua kōrero anō, mai I te tīmatanga o te urutanga mai o te mate uru tānei. Moho anō nei, harakini. So look after yourselves in your various homes and places of occupation, and I roto I ngā mahi hui hui. Whether you're on Zoom or otherwise, kia kaha te tiaki iau koutou. Ko nā maruhiri mai tāmaki, no hotonu I tāmaki. But atu I teira, e rere tonu ana nā mihi kia tātou katoa. Pai tiki ia tātou, e karapoti nei tō tātou tepu. Great to see everybody looking well, and whaiste ka pai. Plenty of work for us to do going forward, and as part of future proofing and all that sort of stuff, ka tuguna tēnei wāhanga I taku karanga tamaiti nei mana tā tātou hui he whakakapi.
Kia ora.
There you go.
Kia nai tātou. He unuhanga anaku, he unuhanga arangi. He māreretanga, he māunutanga. Ko te pou kātū, he pou aha te pou, he pou wehe te pou. Kia heue atu te pō ki tō pairangi, kia heue mai te ao mārama, kia mārama I runga, kia mārama I raro, kia mārama I roto, kia mārama I waho, kia mārama ki tua. Kia tau iho mai te māramatanga ki runga ki e nei, pia ki runga ki e nei tāngata e hui hui nei. Turo whiti whakamaua kia tīnā.
Tīnā au mie, huie, tai ki e. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, Shane. Kia ora, Cassidy. I invite you all now to a virtual lunch.
Yeah.
All right.
I hear there's a fresh air hanging on.
Yeah. Hey, and look forward to seeing you all in person in December, I hope.
Yay.
Yeah.
Your show.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, it's been a cheap round today.
Yeah,
all right. All